When life comes at you with storms, disappointments, and heartbreak, it has a way of leaving you shattered in places you never thought could break. Sometimes it's not the big things that break us, but the small cuts, the silent battles, the moments behind closed doors when nobody sees the tears and nobody hears the cry. Life has a way of breaking us quietly, piece by piece, until you wake up one day and realize that the smile you wear has become a mask and the strength you show is only an act. But prayer, oh yes, prayer is the divine glue that restores what life has broken. Prayer is not just words on your lips. It is the breath of your soul calling out to the one who created you. Prayer is the key that fits the lock of every broken place in your spirit, every fractured piece of your heart, and every shattered dream that lies scattered in the corners of your memory. Prayer gathers those pieces that no counselor could gather, those wounds that no friend could mend, and it takes them to the throne room of heaven where the great healer begins his work. When you bow your head in prayer, you are inviting God into the mess, into the ruins, into the places you've tried to hide. You are saying, God, I can't fix this on my own. I can't mend this heart. I can't heal this pain. I can't put this puzzle back together. And it is in that surrender that restoration begins. For some of you, the reason you still feel broken is not because God can't heal you, but because you haven't fully placed the pieces in his hands. You've kept one fragment back, thinking you can handle it, thinking you can carry it, but true restoration only happens when you let prayer become the bridge between your brokenness and his wholeness. Prayer restores peace where life brought chaos. It restores clarity where confusion clouded your mind. It restores hope where despair had whispered that it was over. When life says you are too broken to be used, prayer reminds you that God specializes in using broken vessels. He doesn't throw you away because you're cracked. He doesn't discard you because you've been dropped. In fact, the cracks of your life are the very places where his light shines through. Prayer takes those cracks and fills them with the presence of God until you no longer see the scar. You see the story of survival. You no longer see the damage. You see the demonstration of God's power. Think about the people in the Bible who were broken. Hannah was broken by barrenness, but prayer restored her with a child. David was broken by guilt, but prayer restored his joy. Elijah was broken by fear, but prayer restored his courage. Even Jesus himself in the Garden of Gethsemane prayed until sweat fell like drops of blood, showing us that when life tries to break you, prayer will carry you into the strength to keep going. If the Son of God needed prayer to restore himself in moments of heaviness, how much more do we need it? Prayer is not just a religious act, it is the oxygen of your spirit. Without it, brokenness will suffocate you. With it, brokenness becomes the pathway to breakthrough. Some of you are trying to fix yourselves with distractions, with relationships, with money, with achievements, but the truth is none of those things will restore what life has truly broken. You can cover a broken heart with laughter. You can cover a wounded spirit with success, but only prayer can go deep enough to touch what people can't see. Only prayer can heal the trauma you never talked about, the pain you never shared, the disappointment you buried under years of pretending to be okay. Prayer reaches places inside of you that even you don't have words for. When your soul groans and you can't even articulate what hurts, the Spirit of God interprets those groans through prayer and carries them to the Father. When life breaks you, prayer does not just restore you back to where you were. It makes you stronger, wiser, deeper, more connected to God. Restoration through prayer is not simply repair, it is transformation. God doesn't just put the pieces back together. He molds them into something new, something greater, something that carries the beauty of the brokenness and the strength of survival. That's why when you look back after prayer, you realize you didn't just recover, you were reborn. You didn't just bounce back, you were elevated. You didn't just survive, you came out stronger than before. Restoration through prayer is not always instant. Sometimes it's a process. Sometimes God doesn't fix you overnight because the process of healing is also the process of teaching. He restores you layer by layer, day by day, prayer by prayer. And as you keep praying, you start noticing that the heaviness doesn't feel as heavy. The tears don't fall as often. The anger begins to fade and hope starts rising again. Prayer restores little by little until suddenly you wake up one morning and realize the wound doesn't sting anymore. The memory doesn't hurt anymore. The fear doesn't grip you anymore. That is the power of prayer. It restores gradually but surely. Restoration through prayer is also restoration of identity. Life tries to break you by convincing you that you are what you went through. It tries to make you believe you are the divorce, you are the mistake, you are the failure, you are the rejection. But prayer restores your identity as a child of God. It lifts you up from the ashes and reminds you that you are more than the sum of your struggles. You are chosen, loved, and destined for purpose. Prayer restores your mind so you can think like God thinks, restores your heart so you can love like God loves, restores your spirit so you can walk in power and authority. And when prayer restores you, it doesn't just stop with you. Prayer has a ripple effect. A restored heart becomes a testimony for others. A restored mind becomes a light for those still lost in darkness. A restored life becomes evidence that God is still in the business of fixing what the world calls unfixable. Your restoration through prayer is not just for you, it is for everyone who will see you and realize that if God did it for you, He can do it for them. When you are caught in the middle of life's storms, when bills are piling up, when relationships are falling apart, when the weight of anxiety presses on your chest so heavy you can hardly breathe, the natural instinct is to focus on the problems. The human mind gravitates toward what is wrong, what is broken, what is missing. It magnifies the mountain until you can't see anything else but the obstacle in front of you. But prayer shifts your focus from the size of your problem to the greatness of your God. Prayer is the lens that clears your vision so that instead of being overwhelmed by what you see, you are anchored by what you believe. When you begin to pray, you stop talking about how big your storm is and start declaring how mighty your God is. Prayer interrupts the cycle of fear by injecting faith. It silences the voice of doubt by amplifying the voice of God. When you pray, you are not just rehearsing your pain, you are redirecting your perspective. You are saying, God, I know this looks bad, but I also know you are still on the throne. I know the situation is tough, but I also know you are tougher. Prayer pulls your eyes off the temporary and fixes them on the eternal. It reminds you that though your circumstances may look impossible, nothing is impossible with God. The enemy's greatest strategy is to keep your eyes glued to your problems because he knows that whatever captures your attention will dominate your spirit. If he can keep you staring at the waves, he can make you forget about the one who walks on water. If he can keep you analyzing the size of Goliath, he can make you forget about the power of the God who slings stones with precision. But prayer breaks that cycle. Prayer snatches your gaze off of the problem and fixes it back on the promise. It whispers to your weary soul, lift up your eyes to the hills, from whence cometh your help? Your help comes from the Lord. Prayer shifts your focus from what you can't do to what God can do. So many of us are trapped in anxiety because we are staring at our limitations. We keep telling ourselves what we don't have, what we can't change, where we've failed, what we've lost. But when you pray, you move beyond your limitations into God's limitless power. Prayer says, I might not know how to fix this, but I know the one who holds the answer. I might hold the answer. I might not have the strength, but I know the one who gives strength to the weary. I might not have the resources, but I know the one who owns the cattle on 1,000 hills. Prayer shifts the focus from your weakness to his strength, from your lack to his abundance, from your despair to his hope. Think about Peter when he stepped out of the boat. As long as his focus was on Jesus, he walked on water. But the moment he shifted his gaze to the storm, the winds, the waves, he began to sink. That is exactly what happens when you focus on problems. They drown you, they pull you under, they convince you that you're not going to make it. But prayer is the act of turning your head back to Jesus. Prayer says, Lord, save me. And immediately, just as Jesus did for Peter, God stretches out his hand to lift you back up. Prayer is the constant redirection of your focus to the one who holds you even when the waters are raging. Prayer not only shifts your focus, it shifts your atmosphere. When you are weighed down with problems, your words often become heavy with negativity. You speak defeat, you speak fear, you speak doubt. And those words create an atmosphere that reinforces the problem. But prayer changes the conversation. Instead of repeating what the enemy is showing you, you begin to declare what God has promised you. Instead of saying, I can't take it anymore, you say, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me. Instead of saying, this is the end, you say, the best is yet to come. Prayer aligns your words with God's truth. And as your words shift, your atmosphere shifts and your spirit begins to rise. Prayer also trains your mind to see differently. The more you pray, the more your thoughts become aligned with God's thoughts. Where you once saw obstacles, you begin to see opportunities. Where you once saw setbacks, you begin to see setups. Where you once saw endings, you begin to see new beginnings. Prayer reshapes your perspective until you are no longer a prisoner of what you see. You begin to walk by faith and not by sight. You begin to understand that what looks like chaos is often God rearranging things for your good. You begin to realize that the problem isn't as powerful as the presence of God that surrounds you. Even in the darkest valleys, prayer lifts your eyes to the shepherd who leads you beside still waters. Even in the furnace, prayer fixes your gaze on the one who walks with you in the fire. Even in the lion's den, prayer shifts your attention from the roaring mouths of lions to the angels who shut them. When you focus on problems, you feel trapped. When you focus on God through prayer, you feel free, and prayer doesn't deny reality. It's not about pretending the problem doesn't exist. It's about refusing to let the problem dictate your peace. It's about acknowledging the storm while also acknowledging that the one in the boat with you has power over the storm. Prayer doesn't erase the problem, but it empowers you to see it through the lens of victory. It reminds you that the same God who parted the Red Sea can part the sea of your struggles. The same God who brought down the walls of Jericho can bring down the walls standing in your way. The same God who raised Lazarus from the dead can resurrect what looks dead in your life. This is why the enemy fights your prayer life so hard. He knows that if he can keep you focused on your problems, he can keep you bound in fear. But if you ever learn to pray until your vision shifts, until your faith rises, until your spirit lifts, you become unstoppable. Because no matter how many problems come, your eyes are fixed on the one who never fails. You realize that problems may be real, but so is your God, and he is greater than every battle you face. Prayer is not just a ritual, not just a moment of folded hands and whispered words. It is the spiritual pipeline through which healing, strength, and divine direction flow into your life. When you come before God in prayer, you are not just speaking into the air. You are making a direct connection with the source of all power, the creator of your soul, the healer of your wounds, and the guide of your destiny. Prayer is how heaven invades earth, how eternity touches time, and how the supernatural steps into the natural through prayer. Healing comes to places that medicine cannot reach. Strength rises in moments where your human will is exhausted, and clarity breaks through the fog of confusion that life so often brings. Healing through prayer is more than physical restoration. It is the mending of the soul, the soothing of the heart, the cleansing of the mind. Many people walk through life carrying wounds, that are invisible wounds of rejection, betrayal, disappointment, and loss. They carry scars that no one can see, but that bleed silently in the night. Prayer is the balm that reaches those hidden wounds. When you pour your heart before God, you allow His Spirit to touch the places you've been afraid to expose. He heals the bitterness by filling you with forgiveness. He heals the grief by filling you with hope. He heals the brokenness by reminding you of His love. Even when the body is still in pain, prayer can heal the spirit so that you can face life with peace, courage, and assurance that you are not alone. But prayer is also the source of strength. Life will test you, break you, and drain you until you feel like you have nothing left to give. You try to smile, but it feels forced. You try to push forward, but your feet feel heavy. You try to believe, but doubt whispers louder. It is in those moments when prayer renews your strength. Isaiah declared, "They that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings as eagles." That is what prayer does. It lifts you when you are too weak to stand. It infuses divine energy into your weary body, divine courage into your trembling heart, divine endurance into your tired soul. Prayer is the place where you exchange your weakness for God's strength, your fear for God's boldness, your fatigue for God's endurance. Without prayer, you are limited to your own power, but with prayer, you tap into the inexhaustible power of heaven. When you pray, something inside of you shifts. The same situation may remain, but you feel different. The mountain may still stand before you, but your legs no longer tremble as you face it. The valley may still stretch ahead, but you no longer walk it in despair. You walk it with confidence. That is the mystery of prayer. It doesn't always change the circumstance immediately, but it always changes you. It gives you the strength to stand when the storm rages, the strength to hold on when everything around you is falling apart, the strength to keep walking when you feel like sitting down and giving up. And prayer brings divine direction. One of the greatest struggles in life is not knowing what to do, not knowing which way to turn, not knowing which voice to follow. Confusion has a way of paralyzing you, of making you feel trapped between choices, of keeping you stuck in fear of making the wrong move. But prayer cuts through confusion like light breaking through the darkness. When you pray, you are inviting the wisdom of heaven into your decisions. God begins to order your steps, open the right doors, close the wrong ones, align you with the right people, and shield you from the wrong ones. Through prayer, He gives you discernment to recognize what looks good but isn't good, what looks like a blessing but is actually a trap, what looks like a dead end but is really the path to destiny. Divine direction through prayer doesn't always come with a loud voice or a dramatic sign. Sometimes it is a gentle nudge, an unexplainable peace about a decision or a restlessness that warns you not to proceed. Sometimes it is a scripture that leaps off the page as though were written for your exact situation. Sometimes it is the still small whisper that calms your spirit and guides your heart. Prayer tunes your ears to the frequency of heaven so that you can hear God even in the noise of the world. Without prayer, you will lean on your own understanding and stumble. With prayer, you lean on His understanding and walk in paths of righteousness. Healing, strength, and direction are all tied together in prayer. A healed heart can hear God more clearly. A strengthened spirit can obey God more faithfully. A divinely guided life can walk in peace even through storms. This is why the enemy will try everything to keep you from praying. He knows that prayer unlocks healing for your pain, strength for your weakness, and direction for your journey. If he can keep you silent, he can keep you weak. If he can keep you distracted, he can keep you confused. But the moment you fall on your knees, the atmosphere begins to shift. The chains begin to break. The answers begin to come, and heaven begins to move on your behalf. Prayer is not about eloquence or perfection. It is about honesty and connection. You don't need fancy words to access healing. You just need a sincere heart. You don't need to shout to receive strength. You just need to surrender. You don't need a map to find direction. You just need to ask the one who already knows the way. Prayer is the equalizer available to the rich and poor, the educated and uneducated, the strong and the weak, the broken and the whole. It is the gift God gave His children so that no matter where you are, no matter what you face, you can always reach Him. And in reaching Him, you find healing, strength, and direction for every step of your journey. Prayer transforms your weakness into God's victory, because prayer is the place where you stop pretending to be strong on your own and start acknowledging that real power comes from Him. So many of us spend our days putting on masks, showing the world a face that says we're fine when inside we are crumbling. We walk into rooms acting like we have it together, while behind closed doors the tears stain our pillows and the questions echo in our minds. We think weakness is something to hide, something to be ashamed of, but prayer shows us that weakness is the very place where God's strength is revealed. When you kneel down and open your heart, when you admit to God that you can't do it by yourself, you are not failing, you are surrendering, and that surrender is the doorway to victory. The Apostle Paul understood this when he said, "When I am weak, then am I strong." It sounds like a contradiction until you understand that prayer shifts the equation. In the natural, weakness means defeat, but in the spiritual, weakness means opportunity for God to display His power. When you come to God in prayer, you bring your weariness, your failures, your insecurities, your doubts, and you lay them at His feet. And in exchange, He gives you His strength, His courage, His wisdom, His victory. Prayer is the transaction where you trade in the insufficient for the all-sufficient, the temporary for the eternal, the broken for the whole. There is something powerful about being honest in prayer. You don't have to come polished. You don't have to come perfect. You don't have to come rehearsed. You can come trembling, come doubting, come questioning, and still be received. God is not intimidated by your weakness. He is not surprised by your shortcomings. He is not disgusted by your failures. In fact, he invites you to bring them, because every time you admit your weakness in prayer, you make room for his victory to manifest. Every time you confess, Lord, I can't do this alone, you open the floodgates for him to step in and show you that he can do what you never could. Think about Gideon hiding in the wine press, filled with insecurity and fear. He prayed and argued with God, saying, I am the least in my family. I am too weak. But God took that weakness and turned it into victory. Through prayer, Gideon was transformed from a man hiding to a man leading an army. Think about Moses, who said, Lord, I can't speak. I am slow of tongue. Yet through his prayers, God gave him strength to stand before Pharaoh and lead a nation to freedom. Think about David, a shepherd boy too small for armor, yet in prayer, he found the strength to stand before a giant and win. Every great victory in Scripture was preceded by someone who admitted their weakness before God and found his strength through prayer. Prayer transforms weakness because it changes your perspective. Without prayer, weakness feels like the end of the story. With prayer, weakness feels like the beginning of God's glory. Without prayer, you see your flaws as disqualifications. With prayer, you see them as the canvas for God's power. When you bring your weakness to God, he doesn't just cover it up. He transforms it into the very testimony that will bless others. The thorn in Paul's flesh did not disappear, but through prayer, Paul discovered that God's grace was sufficient and that the thorn became a constant reminder of God's sustaining power. Weakness in prayer also produces humility. It breaks the pride that makes you think you can do it all on your own. It reminds you that you are not the source of your own strength, that every victory you win is because God fought for you. Humility births dependence, and dependence births breakthrough. When you pray from a place of humility, you are declaring that you are not the hero of your story, God is. You are not the deliverer of your own soul, God is. You are not the one who makes the way, God is. And when he is lifted up, his power is released, his victory is revealed, his name is glorified. Prayer transforms your weakness into victory because it aligns you with the will of God. Sometimes what feels like weakness is actually the moment where God is positioning you for a greater purpose. You may feel like you are failing, but in prayer, he shows you that your failure is not fatal. It is fertile ground for growth. You may feel like your weakness disqualifies you, but in prayer, he shows you that he chose you not in spite of your weakness, but because of it, so that no one could boast and all glory would belong to him. There is something unstoppable about a person who has learned how to turn weakness into prayer and prayer into victory. Because life will always give you moments of weakness. There will always be days when you feel like quitting, moments when you feel like you don't measure up, situations that expose your limits. But if you have built the habit of carrying weakness into prayer, you will also see victory again and again. The battle may look impossible, but prayer gives you the assurance that the battle is not yours. It belongs to the Lord. The problem may feel overwhelming, but prayer shifts the weight off your shoulders and onto His. The storm may rage, but prayer anchors you in the one who speaks peace to the waves. Through prayer, weakness is no longer something to fear. It becomes the very place where you see God's power most clearly. It becomes the evidence that His grace is real, His strength is perfect, His love is unshakable. You begin to realize that your weakness was never meant to defeat you. It was meant to direct you back to Him. You begin to understand that every time you fall to your knees in prayer, you are rising in power. You begin to recognize that what the enemy meant for evil, God is using for good, turning your weakness into a weapon, your tears into testimony, your struggles into stepping stones toward victory.